Yeah, this is being wonderful, and I definitely have to kind of jump in here and say, like, especially thanks to OHS for also sponsoring our event, because without your expertise and then your help, we couldn't have made this event such a success. So thank you so much for all of your support. Yeah.
Are we ready to share, or?
Yes.
Yeah, let's rock and roll.
See if I can do it then. And looking to make, there we are. Okay. Is it over to me then, Alyson?
Yes, it is.
Okay, thank you very much. And thank you for your generous recognition of the Oakville Horticultural Society. We're delighted to be able to participate. We knew we wouldn't have a seedy Sunday or a seedy Saturday this year because of the restrictions on meeting, and we were so pleased when Helen brought this to our attention. I'd just like to say that we plan to have a door prize today, and anybody who is a participant is going to be eligible to win that door prize. The door prize is a family membership. So I think that Helen is looking after the details of that behind the scenes. And don't leave us too soon, because you could win that prize. It's just random. Anyway, Helen has already introduced the panel, and I'm very pleased that they were able to join me. As you will no doubt come to understand, I'm more of a moderator. I'm going to work my way through this slide deck fairly quickly. We wanted to anticipate some of the questions that you might have. So please bear with us. We thought, what kinds of questions might people have who would participate on a Saturday afternoon in something, in a meet and greet with our society. So having said all that, I'm going to move to the next slide and carry on. We're going to ask you to hold your questions. You can put your questions in the chat, and certainly they'll be retained, but we won't break into the slide presentation until the end, and then we'll go after your questions. Okay, so thank you very much. Now, you might say, why would a person start gardening anyway? You're seeing, you know, an influx of people coming into this wonderful, wonderful hobby. They want to get back to basics. They want to learn about nature. They want to teach their children about nature. They want to find things to do outdoors, and it's wonderful to watch things grow outdoors. You can make something beautiful. You can grow your own food, and it's been well documented that you can stay young by gardening. So come on into this wonderful hobby. Now, you might say, I hope that this is going to answer the kinds of questions I have, because I'm very specific about the kind of gardener I want to be. Or maybe you're not. You're just dipping your toe in the waters. You might want to be looking at ways you can grow your own food. You might want to become a veggie and fruit gardener. And your motivation for doing that would be to save money and to eat really fresh produce, to get the whole family involved, and to experience the joys of harvest. There's nothing quite like it. And any of us who grew up with that experience will be able to reinforce how wonderful it is to grow your own veggies and be able to pick them to eat. Maybe you're more interested in flowers. Maybe you've got an aesthetic perspective on things, and you love to have beautiful things around you. Maybe you want to beautify your home and your property. Maybe you're thinking that you'd like to have a ready supply of flowers for floral arrangements, and you think, well, you know, why don't I grow my own roses or my own tulips to put in flower arrangements? Maybe you have a different motivation. Maybe you know that in order to contribute to improving the environment, you should be looking at ways you can host birds and bees and butterflies and other insects to assist Mother Nature in keeping her balance. So whatever your reasons, I hope you've come to the right place. What are you going to need to start? Well, you need soil, sun, water, some tools, seeds or seedlings, time, and some imagination. And the hobby is there waiting for you. Now, we'll start with soil. You want to assess the soil, sun and water situation. You would check, see what kind of soil you have. You just get a handful of it really, and you can see whether it's mostly sandy or clay. If there's a lot of rocks and stones in it, is it wet or dry? These are considerations, and there are tests you can do to see what that balance is that will help you make some decisions. It's not essential that you know exactly what your soil is, but it's going to help. The ideal soil is light and arable. So that is, if you hold a clump of it and you then make a fist and then you open your hand and you still have that clump, then you have a nice light and arable soil, ideal for growing things. You also want to have some sun. If your yard is mostly sunny, then there's nothing to prevent you from growing veggies. Most vegetables need between 6 and 8 hours a day of sunshine. If not, then you would be looking for veggies that don't require quite so much sun, or maybe you're going to be a flower gardener and you're going to need some water. Most of us have water available at the side of the house, but if if somebody has given you a piece of property to garden on, you certainly need water. You can't rely on Mother Nature to water your plants for the whole season. Okay, now compost. You hear people talk about this. Most gardens do better with regular additions of compost. You can make your own, or you can get it free every spring from Halton Waste Management on Highway 25. There are announcements prior to that, or you can go online to see, or you can buy it. You can buy in bulk, and that's a cost-effective way to proceed, or you can split an order with a fellow gardener. What about tools? You don't need all of those tools that you see on the screen before you. You're going to need a shovel and probably a rake, a trowel for small work, a watering can, wheelbarrow. It's not essential that you have a wheelbarrow, but it saves some of the heavy lugging if this hobby really takes off for you. Garden hose, gloves, hat and boots, scissors, pruning, secateurs. You'll know when you need a tool, and you might be making a trip to one of the hardware stores to pick it up once you are in the garden. Now we're going to cover we're going to talk about some definitions here quickly. Maybe this will have you determining a question that you have. So we talk about hardiness zones. We're here in zone 5, and that, if you are purchasing plant material in this area, it's going to be hardy to this zone. If you're perusing a seed catalog and you see things that that require a higher number, they might say hardy in zone 7, then you would be wasting your money on that seed unless you had some way of protecting it. I'm not going to go into too much detail here because just to be safe, know your hardiness, know what zone you're in, and purchase plants that can survive that. You've probably heard people talk about perennials versus annuals. Perennials come back every year. Annuals have to be planted every spring. There's some overlap there. Some perennials behave like annuals annoyingly, and some annuals actually don't die. But if you are planning a garden that you want to return year after year, then you would be choosing perennials. You've heard people talk about container gardening, gardening in raised beds, square foot gardening. These are all ways of extending the garden that you have. If you only have a small yard, you might want to consider some of these approaches. You'll hear people talking about heirloom veggies and heirloom plants, and and that's often a topic of a lot of interest at CD Sundays and CD Saturdays, because these seeds have been saved and shared for many, many years. Hold your questions on that. I hope you do have some, because we've got experts on our panel who can answer some of these questions. There's also, what's a seed, what's a bulb, what's a tuber, what's a corm? These are all starting points for plants. And bulbs, for instance, would be tulips and daffodils. Tubers are things like dahlias, and corms, I believe, are things like irises. We're going to be talking more about native plants in a few slides, and so I'll just say that definition is coming. And you'll hear people talking about invasive species, and the suggestion that we avoid introducing them to our gardens, and that we have some defenses against them. Now, the kinds of questions that we might hear at a typical Oakville Horticultural Society meeting are some of the following. And when we meet people who say, what's your hobby? We might get some of these questions. Questions like, what characteristics would an English country garden have? How do I divide hostas and other perennials for my own use or to share with friends? Do you have any suggestions beyond peonies and iris? These are beautiful perennials that come back every spring, but then when they're gone, what should I plant so that I have something that's still interesting in my garden? Can I mix annuals with perennials, and which ones would we recommend to do that? The answer to that question is yes, you can, and I recommend that you do choose annuals to give you color through the season. Things like the salvias and the begonias and the impatiens, and certain daisies are annuals. How can I discourage rabbits? Well, this is one of the things you learn as a gardener. You're working in nature, and nature sometimes gives you more of some of the things you think are nice than you want. Aside from paying attention to what rabbits are eating in your yard and doing something to keep them away from those things, whether you decide to grow your lettuce in raised beds instead of on the ground, or a little strategic chicken wire around things, I think we could write a whole library of books on how to discourage rabbits and other visitors, but we're here to share, I think. And should I mulch around shrubs, flowers, and along garden rows, or is mulch just something that the hardware store is trying to sell us? The answer is, yeah, I recommend mulching. Don't over mulch, don't make it too thick, but it can keep the weeds down, and it can keep some of the moisture in, and it won't discourage the rabbits, I'm afraid. But anyway, some of what you want to achieve will happen. Okay, I'm not able to actually see this slide. I hope people can see the heading. The heading is, as a family of 4, what should we plant? And there's lots of advice available online about volume of plants to prepare for a family. But if you're a beginner at this, start small and go from there. Don't overplant each and everything, but you'll learn about whether you've got enough sun to be growing tomatoes, or your soil is arable enough to have a successful crop and that sort of things. And you'll learn what kind of yard you have based on what you want to grow. And this might seem like a silly thing to advise, but plant what your family likes to eat. I'm sure anybody who has done some vegetable gardening has had a huge crop of something that actually they couldn't give away. Once they'd had 3 meals a week of, I don't want anybody to take offense at what I choose, but let's say New Zealand spinach. That's a lot of meals of something that you're kind of choking down, and don't plant it if you don't think your family will eat it, because you want people to be enthusiastic about and looking forward to eating what comes out of the garden. So that's my advice on that. And things like days to maturity, because if you find yourself starting late and you haven't allowed enough time for that plant to get to an eatable state, then it's disappointing for everybody. Like, a little miniature watermelon that still needs a couple of weeks to ripen, but the season's over, for instance. So you're watching for those things. Okay, so let's say you have a plan and you're saying, now what do I do? You're going to level the plant area, form rows or mounds. You sow your seeds. Generally, the bigger the seed, the deeper it should be planted. And things as small as carrot seeds are surface sown. Some seeds can be sown as soon as the soil can be worked, and others you have to wait for warmer soil temperatures. Keep the soil moist until germination has occurred, and once the seedlings are about 3 to 5 centimeters tall, they should be thinned. If you're thinking of carrots, you have to imagine what that grown-up carrot, how much room that grown-up carrot's going to need, and that's the kind of thinning you have to do. And the advice here is, if all else fails, read the seed packet. Okay, we anticipate that we might have some people online who love roses and want to know if they can grow them. And this example came from Marie's collection. This is the Leander Rose Grace. The whole world loves roses and wants to be able to grow them. So,
Paula, can I speak to these slides?
yes, you can if you like.
Okay, so roses are something that's much easier to grow now than they used to be because of all the new varieties coming on the market, especially made for our area here in Canada. So choose wisely. You can find disease and pest resistant roses, so find them. Choose local field grown. Now, Paula said that if you go to the nursery and buy a plant here, it's likely grown here and adapted to our climate. Not so with roses. If you go to a specialized rose nursery like Palatine, then yes, that's true. If you go to the local grocery store and buy a rose, it could very easily be grown on California rootstock and it won't last more than a year. So be very careful where you buy your roses. If you're buying them, look for one with 3 good, strong canes. Okay, next slide, Paula, please.
Yes.
Okay, you have to have sun. Roses don't like shade. They won't grow in the shade. They will grow in partial shade, but they won't bloom for you. So make sure you've got a good 6 hours of sun, and morning sun is best. Provide wind shelter, especially if you're going to grow climbers. Don't plant in wet ground. Roses absolutely do not like to have wet feet, nor do they grow well near tree roots, under overhanging branches or house eaves. So that person who's asking about growing plants near the Norway maple, do not grow roses there. Okay, next slide. If you're going out to buy a rose and you're going to buy either bare root or pot rose, bring it home. If it's in a pot, soak it overnight. It is definitely important that that rose be well watered before you try putting in the ground. The hole you dig should be twice the size of the root ball, should be at least 10 centimeters deeper than the root ball. Add mycorrhizal fungus powder to the soil, but nothing else. And don't amend the soil. The newest thinking on planting roses is if you put really rich, good soil in the hole, the rose will grow beautifully till it hits the barrier of what soil was there before. And then it will very much be stunted. So do not amend the soil. Add the mycorrhizal, put the soil that was in there back in the hole. You know, you will not fertilize this rose for at least a year, or at least until it has bloomed the first time. So plant in the autumn when the earth is warm. And the reason for that is the plant needs time for the roots to establish themselves very well before winter comes. And if you plant too late, that won't happen and you might have severe winter damage. If If you're planting bare roots, you're going to trim, you look at the roots and plant them. The bud union, this is something that people wonder about a lot. So I'm just showing you this picture to show you where the bud union is. And I also want to caution you to be very careful what you read online. Here in Canada, in our area, the bud union has to be below the ground, 10 centimeters at least. But if you go online and you read something from somebody who grows roses in North Carolina or California or any of those places that have much higher number zone, they will be saying, plant your rose with the bud union above the ground. So be very careful what you read. The rest of the stuff about roses is really specialized. So if you have other questions about roses, I can try and answer them, but I would really encourage you to buy Canadian grown roses, the newest, the 49th parallel series, the Canadian Shield, the Aurora Borealis is the newest one, Chinook Sunrise. There's another one coming on the market. It's going to be called Arctic Sun. It's a beautiful yellow. So all the Artist Series roses, like Oscar Peterson, they grow well here. And of course, the Old Explorers and all the roses from Morden and Modern and all the roses that were developed in Ottawa. So make sure you know where your rose comes from, what rootstock it's on, and pick Canadian roses. And that's all I have to say about roses, except for whatever specific questions you might have later.
Thanks, Marie. We're going to move on to natives. What is a native plant? Aki, do you want to take over?
Yes, okay, so a native plant is one that occurs naturally without human introduction. And some native plants that you might know are milkweed, New England aster, and trilliums. But also think about native shrubs like sumac and native trees like white oak and sugar maple. But just be warned that most of the plants that you see at commercial nurseries and in gardens currently are not native. So why plant natives? And I have three reasons here. The first being beauty. Native plants are generally not as showy as traditional landscape plants, but they're fascinating in their color, texture, and variety. And you also have beauty in your garden due to the insects, butterflies, moths, beetles, flies, and birds that will come to your garden. The second big reason is you want to do your part for biodiversity. So native plants have formed relationships over thousands of years with their ecosystem, and we as humans have altered and harmed those ecosystems. Yet we still rely on the relationship between native plants and pollinators for our food supply. And of course, pollinators are important as food sources for other things higher in the food chain. So planting native plants is a small but significant way of restoring some of the upsets that we've caused. And I put here less maintenance with some warnings, because a native plant, like any other, must be situated in the right place to thrive and thus require less maintenance. But an example of where you would need less fertilizer and water would be if you replaced at least part of your lawn with some native prairie plants, because they're adapted to the sunny and sometimes droughty conditions that can be found in that ecosystem. And native plants generally require less water and fertilizer than annuals. So that's another thing to think about. Next slide, please. Here's an example of plant it and they will come. This is a picture of a hummingbird moth that was taken in Paula's garden. And it's pretty special to see this in your garden because it looks like a hummingbird, but it's a bit smaller and it hovers, and it's a very large insect. So it's a special thing to see that. That was taken last year. Thanks. So these are just a few of the resources that are available to you, and I've used all of these and many more. But I'd like to point out that if you're getting started locally, there are organizations like Oakville Green and Halton Environmental Network that can give you advice on what natives plant where. And Oakville Green will be having a native plant and shrub sale this spring. And also, I'd like to point out to you that, I guess it's the fifth one down, a very lovely illustrated document that you can access free online. And it's entitled A Flower Patch for the Rusty Patch Bumblebee. It's written by Dr. Sheila Kola, who is a bee researcher at York University, and Lorraine Johnson, who's a well-known Canadian garden author. And of course, you can always come to the Oakville Hort Society for advice as well. Thank you.
Thanks. Thank you very much, Aki. We anticipated that some of our the visitors or people joining us might simply want to ensure that their property is showcased suitably rather than just a bare lawn. And where do you start? Well, it's best to start with trees and shrubs that are planted in such a way to soften the entrance and front elevation of your property. I think curved lines are always very welcoming. Choose flowers that complement the color of the home, either complement or contrast, so you have a little drama. And avoid using too many different things, and be sure that the scale of any containers or anything that you're choosing is in keeping with what else is going on. So you don't want a whole lot of little things like little containers, and you don't want something that was made for a much larger property. So keep that in mind too. How can I attract birds to my garden? We have so many bird species in the Halton region. It's very impressive. And they're looking for lots of varieties and where they're going to stay and where they're going to shop and eat. And so they look for that in the most lush gardens and well-defended gardens and gardens with variety. You're going to want to ensure that there is cover from trees and shrubs and a source of water nearby. So they're not going to come if the feeder or what you're putting out is open to predators. They're too smart to do that. And by choosing pollinator and native plants, you're going to be attracting birds and other wildlife to your backyard. So best of luck with that. It's really a pleasure to be able to see these things up close. Now, here's a question. Where can I get free or inexpensive plants? So that's a picture of a plant sale. And, hort societies, and certainly the Oakville Horticultural Society endeavors to put on a plant sale every spring. We were not able to do that in 2020. We're not sure we're going to be able to do that this year. It's looking unlikely. But the plant sales that we put on are basically divisions that our members have done in their garden. And the beauty of that is that if you buy something that's been divided from Aki's garden or David's garden or any one of our members, you know that has had some success in their garden and they've got so much of it, they can give some away. So watch for garden clubs and church fundraiser plant sales. That's a great place to get plants. You can trade divisions with your neighbors and friends if you already have some things growing. If you are in town, if you see some of these pop-up sale tents and whatnot that are just open for May and June to sell plants, then they often put their plant material on sale so they can close down that site in June. And you can start plants from purchased or donated seeds. And that's often what brings people to CD Sunday. So keep your eyes peeled, let people know that you're interested in growing things. And gardeners are very generous and they love to see their successful plants find more places to grow. So that's great too. Now, you might be saying, what is the Oakville Horticultural Society doing about the future? And I wanted to tell you about the scholarship that we give out every year for $1,000. We introduced this in 2017 because we wanted something to mark our 60th anniversary as a society. So this came up at the AGM in 2016. Somebody said, why don't we have a scholarship? And so we went to work to have one. It's granted every year to a postgrad student of horticulture or some related study. And the deadline is May 31st. So if you're in the audience and you are a student and you're considering postgrad, that's beyond your bachelor's degree studies, go online to our site to see about this scholarship. I've got a poster there that gives you some of the details. And if you visit the Halton Garden Week site and you find this poster, you can have more details sent to you. Okay, and lastly, where do gardeners meet? The Oakville Horticultural Society is a great place to learn more about this amazing hobby. We welcome visitors to attend our monthly meetings. We meet the second Monday of every month from September to June. We have, in addition to that, we have a newsletter every month. We have activities in the community that people can be involved in. Fun with Flowers that we do every family day. I'm kind of going back to the previous workshop that Marie gave on designing your own small arrangement. We have a junior gardening program that Helen runs. We have a plant sale. We have garden tours. We have a lot of things that are interesting for people to do, and it's a great way to meet other people who are interested in gardening. And our speaker on March 8th is going to be Nikki Jabbour. So if you're interested in undercover gardening or extending the gardening season, please join us. You just have to go online to our website and send a request in to be given the Zoom invitation, and you'll be in. So that brings me to the end of the slides. I want to thank you for being patient, and if any of this has prompted some questions from you, please let's have them. I don't know if it's going to be Helen or Alyson who's taking over this part, or how we're going to proceed, but we've got about 20 minutes left, or 25 minutes left.
Helen, you're gonna jump up here with me?
Sure,
There we
we'll
go.
tag team for the final.
Yeah, exactly. Well, that was brilliant. Thank you so much, everybody. So let's see, there is definitely a lot of chat happening. Oh my goodness. There's like quite a few pages here.
Well, way back.
Yeah, going all the way back. All right, so the first question, and you guys can, put your hand up, or just, the first to unmute gets to answer. What can I grow under a large Norway spruce? The ground is shaded and very dry. Are there any good plants for pollinators that would grow here? I don't want ivy or periwinkle if I can help it.
Yes, good.
Yeah, can I jump in on this one?
Certainly.
Okay, so yeah, don't plant periwinkle or ivy. Those are invasive plants, actually. Okay, and Helen, if you have anything to add to this, I would try stuff like, Canada anemone with a caveat that it's quite vigorous. Maybe wild geranium, maybe some native strawberries that are good in the shade. White wood aster and maybe a native ginger. That's for the native side.
Can I add a little bit there?
Sure.
First of all, the shade is a problem. So if the spruce branches are way down low to the ground, you can trim them back up to maybe 4, 5, even 6 feet high, and just cut those branches off, and the tree will look a lot smaller. If it's one of these old 40, 50-year-old ones, it's going to look very big. You can make it smaller. Secondly, you can put a raised bed in underneath, because the feeder roots of that tree are way outside the trunk area. The roots near the trunk area are just conducting water, so you're not affecting the feeder roots by putting a raised bed in there, just so long as you don't put the soil up against the trunk. And then you've got a little better chance of growing some plant. Otherwise, you've not got much hope of growing anything, because that ground will be hard and dry and unsuitable for growing. But you can put a raised bed, maybe 4 to 6 inches deep, maybe 5, 6 feet out from the trunk, and you can grow a lot of things there.
Can I add to that too? Because I have a similar situation, and what I have grown in that situation is a juga. It does grow there, and it does bloom, but not like it does in the sun. The other thing that grows there is Tiarella, but it does not bloom there. So the answer to the question is, what can you grow in that space to attract pollinators? Well, probably nothing. They won't bloom in there.
And you need blooms to attract the pollinator.
Great. So moving on, before Alyson joins, somebody asked, they have a difficult time growing root vegetables in their raised bed.
First of all, how deep is the soil in the raised bed?
That was what I was going to ask. Yeah.
I mean, a raised bed can be wooden-sided, or it can be just raised up on the ground. So it's got to be deep enough for the root. Carrots can get 6, 7, 8 inches long. So it's got to be deep enough for that. Secondly, what soil have you got in the raised bed? Because they dry out quicker than soil and the ground soil will do. So you've got to make sure it's watered properly. If you do that, if you have deep enough soil and are willing to put enough water onto it, then you can grow whatever you want on it.
As long as it's short, things like beets and radish should grow there if you water it.
But yeah, I was going to mention that I have used just regular growing trays that are, the 1 to 2 inches deep, and I've grown a couple varieties of carrots. There's the golf ball and there's the Paris ones. So they're really small. They do fantastic. Radishes, but yeah, it's making sure that you've got good moisture content. You're going to have to make sure you've got a good amount of organic soil. Clay is not going to be great unless your goal is to break the clay apart. Otherwise, you're going to have these like super funky looking roots. Yeah, Paula's like, yep, been there. And making sure your soil is more on the sandy loam side, because we want our roots, to have that nice universal look to them. But yeah, you can get pretty creative, and you don't necessarily need a lot of space. If you've got a balcony, a small pot, you can grow a lot in there.
The three most important words in gardening is compost, compost, and compost. Put those into your raised bed.
Right.
Any more questions, Helen?
Tons. Alyson, you.
Oh yeah, no, I'm like still thinking about compost and carrots over here. Yeah, I have an old container full of soil. How do I make it more fertile and reuse the soil from this year?
It's a good question because it suggests that you are attempting to reuse soil in a container from one year to the other, and there's some debate about that. People who live on the 17th floor of an apartment might not want to be changing the soil all the time. So this is thinking that somebody wants to be able to maintain many gardeners just tip the soil out and start fresh with the containers.
But you do have to take it out. You have to take it out and mix it with new compost and new material. You can't just add fertilizer to it. That won't work. You need to add something to it, and you can't plant the same thing every year in that same pot, because one kind of plant uses up the different nutrients in the other one. And say you plant a tomato in the pot, it uses up all the nutrients the tomatoes use, and then you try and plant another tomato in there and it just doesn't work well. So you do have to replace the nutrients in the soil, and you can't just do that with fertilizer. You have to take it out, mix it up with a bunch of compost and put it back.
Right.
We haven't talked about fertilizer actually, and maybe in the interest of getting to all the questions, that we won't dwell on it, but we used to hear more about adding fertilizer every year than we have lately, it seems.
Well, the next question is actually about fertilizer. So this is a great segue. Is Miracle-Gro fertilizer safe for veggies, or should I be using organic fertilizers? So there's a really.
I would use organic for sure.
It's safe. It gives the necessary nutrients. It doesn't do anything to improve the soil. And that's very important. So if you want to use an organic fertilizer, that will certainly improve the soil. Miracle-Gro works. Commercial growers use it and produce big crops, but it does eventually deplete your soil and much salts in the soil. And if you use too much of it, you get runoff. So it's not the best thing, but it does work.
Yeah. If the soil gets full of salts, actually, it becomes almost sterile. If you get enough salts in there, you have to really work it hard to get it back to something usable. And you could make compost tea.
Yeah. If you just use straight compost, you don't need much fertilizer anyway, whether it's organic or synthetic. Use compost.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Are there any other materials that any of you use in your gardens that would fall in the category of organic amendments other than compost? Yes.
If you're growing
roses,
you can chop up banana peels and put them around your roses.
Okay.
You can put fish emulsions in on roses, and actually fish emulsion fertilizers are good for almost anything.
Yeah.
You could even plant a dead fish under a rose.
Heard that one.
Yeah.
All right, we have the next question. I have Apelia peperomioides. I did probably pronounce that wrong, but that's okay. And it has leaves that have turned very light. No, it has leaves very light green, and it gets brown spots and eventually drops at least once every few weeks. It gets good light and water. So what are your thoughts?
A house plant or?
House plant, yeah.
Yeah.
So yellow leaves might mean too much water, actually.
Mhm.
So the fastest way to kill a house plant is to overwater it.
Yeah.
Or underwater it, but
Yeah.
overwatering is worse, actually. Overwatering is worse. So the brown spots, there's lots of things brown spots could be, so we'd almost have to look at that. It could be nothing other than sunburn if it's in a lot of sun. So a chloritic leaf turns yellow, and that means not enough sun, but you're saying this one has enough sun. So my best guess is you overwatered it.
Mhm.
In the brown spots, you'd have to send us a picture.
Which, you will put the info in there, so feel free to do that. We have a little bit more on compost. Are eggshells a good source of calcium to add into the garden bed? And somebody else asked about eggshells and coffee grounds. So if you want to tackle both of those, coffee grounds and eggshells, what are your thoughts about adding them to the garden?
Yeah, eggshells help, but you have to eat an awful lot of eggs to make much difference. So all my eggshells go on the compost pile. And the next day that you can't find next year, I should say, not a bit of eggshells. They've all broken down and gone into the compost. And that's where I put my eggshells.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
And David has beautiful compost. When we do our plant sale and he pots up plants for the divisions, that's the best soil going. I just have to say.
And I heard from on the American Rose Society on a chat not very long ago. They talked at length about coffee grounds. You have to be careful with them because you're actually changing the pH of the soil. And if you use too much or you use it wrongly, you can damage your plants way more than the kind of help you're trying to give them. So do some research on coffee grounds before you start amending with coffee grounds.
Okay.
Right, so
they're
our
okay going into your compost pile because that dilutes them an awful lot. I wouldn't put them as a
Into
top
compost
dressing.
fine. That's true. Same thing with ash. Be careful, putting it straight on the ground.
All right, what plants are drought and rabbit resistant?
And rabbit resistant.
Yes, drought and rabbit.
I don't know.
A very big generalization is that gray foliaged plants tend to be drought resistant. That's a big generalization, but it actually is somewhat true. So David, you can take this one.
I was going to say rabbits and deer preferences, but if they're hungry in winter, they'll eat almost anything.
Yeah.
So the best rabbit resistance is just a 2-foot length of chicken wire around the vegetables you want to protect. You can buy a roll of 2-foot wire from Home Depot or dollar store, And
What about,
doesn't need to be more than 2 feet. You don't need a 4-foot fence. Just 2 feet
No.
will keep the rabbits out. Put
Yeah.
that around your plant.
Yeah. I have
Apart from that, Bovex is effective. It's a natural ingredient containing bug meal and all kinds of things like that. Bovex sprayed on your plants will work. It doesn't wash off, but as the plant grows, it needs renewing. It's the same with I forget the name of the other one, but Bovex works. You can buy it in any Canadian Tire or any place like that. I would just put a chicken wire fence around.
Yeah, I have my veggie garden chicken wire fence and I have no rabbits in it. Even the little guys can't get in there.
Yeah.
Works.
Yeah.
But I put the chicken wire under the ground for about 6 inches before I started going up. So they couldn't dig under the edge.
Yeah.
Aki, you must know some native plants that are drought resistant and, drought tolerant and resistant to rabbits.
yeah, I would say, well, I know one non-native that is drought resistant to rabbits, like things like lavender, anything with a little bit of a scent on it, the rabbits will go and tend to look at other stuff. So in that category would be things like bee balm, native bee balm. The problem is anything that's very tender, that comes up from the ground each year, that is like rabbit food. Anything that's more established, like a shrub, that might have a better chance of being rabbit resistant and drought.
The perfect solution is get a dog.
Yeah, I don't have a dog, and you know, I just grow enough plants to try and feed the rabbits and keep my garden. And because I figure I'm kind of inheriting their territory anyway, inhabiting their territory, so it's hard to fight rabbits.
And your point about them liking the newly emerging and newly planted plants.
Yeah.
You can keep an eye on those things and even just put a little bit of a caging around it while they become established.
And
maybe in future years, they'll be left alone.
Yeah, I make rings out of chicken wire and put them around the young plants until they're tougher. And that works pretty well.
Yeah.
I can interject. I see we've got 24 chats, so we better move along pretty fast.
Okay.
This one might be a bit longer, but do you guys have any quick ideas of books for beginner gardeners?
I think the best book is the Reader's Digest book on Canadian agriculture. It's a very good book, not full of great big glossy pictures, but it's an excellent book. It covers almost every aspect of gardening at all levels. So the Reader's Digest book is probably the best one I would recommend.
Year-round vegetable gardening.
Sorry?
Oh yeah, good.
Yep. But Aki, do you have any-
because there might be a session coming up eventually about this individual here. Yeah.
Nikki.
Yeah.
Jabour.
Yeah, fantastic book. The other one I recommend is J.M. Fortier, The Market Gardener. Even though he's talking about small to medium scale agriculture, there's so much you can really pull out of that book for the home garden.
And I have a copy of Marjorie Harris's favorite flowering shrubs. I think she produced it about 20-25 years ago. And I have had a lot of success with the shrubs from that book. And I have to admit that I've tried almost all of them. So she's a Toronto, her garden was always in Toronto. I believe she's up north now, but so she knew our area, and it was a good way to extend her advice to my own backyard.
So we better move on, but Lorraine Johnson is also very good for native plants, and she has one.
Yeah.
I have.
There you go.
Fantastic book. Yeah,
Hold up one.
yeah. This is
You guys should put the names of these books into chat for people.
yeah. This
Just
is an
write the
excellent
names of
book.
your books into the chat.
Okay. I'll
All
try.
right. Alyson, you're a faster typer than me, so I'll quickly ask the next one. Is this an old wise tale? You can tell the health of your soil by the amount of worms in your garden. Is that true?
Depends on whether you mean earthworms. If you mean white grubs, that's very unhealthy soil.
I'm guessing they mean earthworms, yeah. So is it true you need a big handful of worms every time you dig up a hole? Does that mean it's healthy?
Huh.
If you've got plenty of organic matter in your soil, you'll get the worms without adding any more. Like the organic matter, and they take it down into the soil.
So,
Yeah.
So I actually had a really interesting conversation with Beatrice at our trivia night. Beatrice is from Oakville Green. And we learned, spent, oh gosh, I think like 10 minutes talking about this, but earthworms are actually invasive.
Yeah,
Yes.
they are.
So
I agree.
you don't want to have the earthworms
That's
in your soil.
That
So like,
sort of depends on where
That's
they
in
are,
the
though.
forest.
Yeah.
well, they're kind of everywhere now. They are becoming naturalized, but they're not supposed to be here. There used to be native worms, and I think, what was it? The only place that there are native worms is still BC.
Yeah, they were wiped out in the Ice Age.
Yeah. So
Elsewhere.
I wish I'd had you in my ear on trivia night there, David.
so is it better to add compost or worm manure for your garden, or can you use both?
Compost.
Have different applications.
Black gold.
You'd need a wheelbarrow full of worm manure, which would cost you a fortune. Whereas if you use compost, you make your own, it costs you nothing.
Yeah.
Worm manure is okay for starting seedlings and that kind of thing, and it's great stuff. You couldn't buy it in quantities to do much good in your garden.
So here's the next question.
Great for potted plants and things like that.
How much compost, as in a percentage of your soil, do you need to replace when you add to a previous year's soil in a container? So we were talking about that before. So how much you said to replace it? You have to replace all of it, or can half of it is fine, a quarter? What would you suggest for a container?
The thing I saw on the internet not so long ago would suggest that it needs to be half and half.
I would agree.
Yeah.
Yeah.
that kind of rounds out our questions.
Oh,
People are very excited about compost, which is great. There was one question I did answer in the chat already. Is it illegal to sell unlabeled GMO seeds to home gardeners? Yes, it is. It is a federal legal requirement that anything that is GMO must be labeled, which includes fruits and vegetables in the grocery store. What do you think of seed buying from Canadian Tire? Are they genetically modified?
No. Simple word, no, it's illegal.
Yeah.
You cannot buy at retail any genetically modified seed. It simply is not available to the retail customer.
But yeah, in terms
don't be
of
afraid of genetically modified seed. It's used by big growers in cotton crops and soybean and canola, things like that, but it is not used for seed production for you.
The problem you might run into is somewhere like Canadian Tire is you don't know how long that seed's been sitting around, so it might not be viable anymore. And I have to tell you, I've been talking to Connie Bile from William Dam Seeds, and you can't get seeds from them anymore. They're the biggest seed distributor that's closest to us. Yep. They have had such a huge increase in their mail orders that they have closed the store. Every single person in the store that would be normally selling you a seed is packing seed orders. So you're going to have trouble buying good seed this year.
You know, I've used dollar store seeds, 3 packs for $1.
Yeah,
I got good results from them.
Yeah, you just have to be aware that your germination rate might not be great.
Yeah. If they're a year old, you might get a little poor germination, but they'll still grow.
Yeah. Put 3 seeds in the hole instead of 1.
Yeah.
And then you thin. What Paula said about thinning is things like carrots and radishes and beets. 3 days after they show up above the ground, you should be thinning. Any later than that, the root vegetables will start to get twisted and deformed. And so you need to thin very early.
And you keep thinning too. You might thin initially and then thin again in a couple of weeks.
Yeah, you might.
And those thinnings that you draw out when you actually have a little miniature carrot, those can be eaten. And there are even recipes that use such things.
Yeah, it's like eating sprouts.
Yeah, exactly. And the
You can eat the tops and all.
That's right. That's right. So don't waste anything. I think there was a workshop on that.
And you should grow your beets, lots of beets, so that you can eat the greens on the top in your salads.
That's
Eat the young leaves and leave the old ones to grow the roots. And grow sorrel. Does anybody grow sorrel? My grandkids call sorrel lemon lettuce and they love it. It makes salads unbelievably tasty.
Good advice.
And
And, you know,
sorrel is a perennial.
you make a very good point, Marie. When you are growing things from seed, you have such a wide range for variety as opposed to going to the market and,
Right. Yeah.
and what you have available there. The same thing applies to flowers.
Yeah, I buy 4 or 5 packages of lettuce, different kinds, all different. I mix it all together and then I plant it in pots. So then all I have to do is pull this bunch of lettuce and I've got a whole salad already because I've got 6 different kinds of lettuce.
Good.
And you can plant 3 or 4 crops of lettuce every year. It is very short germination, short growing time.
Mhm. And can take cool soil.
Well, we are running.
Yeah,
out.
yeah.
Sorry.
You know,
Thing
we
about-
could talk forever, right?
You could. Thing about lettuce is those early crops, if you plant them too early and they freeze, well, no big deal, just plant them again.
Yeah.
Well, we are running out of time. We want to thank each and every one of you from Oakville Horticultural Society for joining us and for being our sponsor for this event. It has been amazing. If anybody who is listening has missed any of the sessions, they are all recorded. They are all available on our feed loop. So you just have to click on the sessions. You'll see the video pop up and just press play. If you've been on it for a while, you might have to refresh your screen because I'm going to be uploading the last 2 in the next half hour. So you'll just need to refresh and you'll see them pop up and you can press play. What else do I need to add? Oh, the door prize. Yes. So
Yeah.
and I have been assigning everybody a number and now I'm going to do a random app, the random number generator app. We're high tech here. So, and don't worry, for this door prize, it is to win a membership to the Oakville Horticultural Society for a year. And you might be thinking, yes, but I don't live in Oakville. They're all online and probably going to be for the foreseeable future. So all you need to do is contact them once you've won and you'll be able to access all of their webinars online. So from the comfort of your home. So easy peasy this year. COVID has made things wonderful for people.
A silver lining.
Yeah.
All right, so here we go. Random generator. It is number 9. And number 9 is Margaret F. Margaret, I kind of scrawled your last name and I just know it's a Margaret F. I will write it in the chat box.
Yay.
Lovely.
So Margaret, please contact us at grow@Halton Food and we will get you in contact with the Oakville Horticultural Society, or you can go on their website and contact them directly, but make sure, there's your last name, you get in touch and you will get your membership.
That includes the newsletters too. So those go out electronically.
Yes, everything's online. So congratulations and thank you again to everybody.
Thank you, everybody. Yes, thank you.
And thank you, Halton Food, for an amazing week.
That was amazing. Well done.
Excellent.